All right. Happy Monday, guys. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Roundtable and Friday for the Sabby Show. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Welcome. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. Danny HAIPHONG will be here at 7:15, so just in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to go through some intros, tell you what we're talking about tonight, and give shout outs to people who are patrons. So quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you so much for your support, guys. If you're interested and you want to become a patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and Ultimate. All of their names are listed here. Thank you so much, guys, for the support. I really appreciate it, and it really does go a long way. And I want to give a shout out to new patrons. Shout out to Sammy Hollum, Mitchell Held, Diego Perez, Vandal X Altec, and JB Caliph. And I'm assuming that's short for California. Thank you so much. Their names are also scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So people have asked me this before. Who are all those people at the bottom of the screen? Those are patrons. So thank you guys so much for that. And I do want to go ahead and let you know what we're going to talk about tonight. So should be an interesting discussion tonight. I'm going to discuss Ryan Grimm versus Jimmy Dore. I don't know if you've seen that exchange over on Twitter, but I am going to talk about that tonight, and not to attack anyone per se, but to point out something that tends to happen when people retweet video clips from Twitter and they don't go to the original source. So that is important to note. Also tonight, we're going to discuss Glenn Greenwald, NOMIKI KONST, and Emma VIGELAND battle. This is all surrounding NOMIKI announcing that she is running for New York Senate. I have an update about that, so that's what I'm going to be discussing there. And of course, Danny HAIPHONG will be here at 7:15 p.m. He's going to discuss this whole conflict with China and Taiwan. And so I know some of you have been asking me if I would discuss that. And I said, I need to bring Danny on for that because he knows a lot more about that than I do, to be honest. So finally got Danny to come back. So he's going to talk about that and break that down for us. So that should be awesome. I do want to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and get it out of the way here. For those of you who have been watching the NBA Finals, yes, the Celtics were destroyed last night. It sucks. I'm just going to be real. I want to be honest. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. We were destroyed. That was an awful game for us. That was awful. We were missing shots everywhere, brick after brick, too many fouls, technical foul, which we should not get, not at this stage in the game. And some people felt like the refs weren't being fair, but whatever, it's the finals. We know this is going to happen when you don't have home court advantage. They are coming back to Boston for game 3. So I sincerely hope that they can turn things around and get back in the game. But I don't want to see what I saw last night again. I do not want to see that again. All right. I want to go ahead and give shout outs to people in the chat. When I played basketball, you guys, if we had a horrible game like that, we had to run laps. They used to also make us do suicides. I don't know if everyone knows what that is, but the suicide runs, they're when you run and then you touch you touch the floor and you get back up, you touch the floor and you get back up, you touch the floor. And it's like, yeah, I think they might have to run laps when they get back. Want to shout out people in the chat. First and foremost, thank you so much, Justin B, for the super chat. Doobie doobie doo. Love you, Sabs. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Shout out to OTR Trucker. Thank you, Sabby Sabs, for not using that stupid looking stock photo of Emma. Yeah, I know people use that one a lot. I'm not really a fan of that. I think it looks like a stock photo, just like you said. Shout out to Miguel, says happy Monday. Peace. What's going on? Shout out to Aspen Fallen. Always great to see you. Greetings, AG gives a thumbs up. Shout out to Angela, says, hey, ready for Sabby today. Hope everyone is well. What's going on, Joe? Says, it's morphin' time. Are you guys familiar with the Power Rangers? I don't know the age groups of everyone in the chat, but Power Rangers used to say that. It's morphin' time. Let's go, Power Rangers. Shout out to Send the Text. The Grimster is back for more. Oh boy, this should be an interesting discussion. Shout out to Hannah G, says Sabby Monday. Greetings, gamer, says hello. What's going on, Ellie Mayo? Gas is up 60 cents in a week, but mainstream media and The Economist will say inflation peaked last night. Yeah. Some of the talking points surrounding inflation is ridiculous. Shout out to Sydney, says doobie doo. What's going on, Lawrence? Always great to see you. He's also a Sabby member. Doobie doobie doo, just another Manic Monday. Shout out to Eric T. Red, who's a Sabby member, says, hey, all. Greetings, Where Pilgrim says, hey, everybody. What's going on, Notori? Lots of love, lots of love. Shout out to Silva, says, peace and cool. That's the Silver Surfer. That's from Fantastic Four, if you guys aren't aware. If you're not into comics, Silver Surfer was from Fantastic Four. Shout out to Leroy, who's a Sabby member, says, hey there, comrades, peace. What's going on, Mary? Says, hey, all. Shout out to Terry, says, hello, Sabby. Hello, Terry. Greetings. Greetings, Mr. King of Troy, says, salute. Salute to you, too. What's going on, ZoMG Ruler? Jimmy Dore might run for president. I haven't heard that yet, but that would be interesting. Shout out to Gore, son of none. Evening, everyone. Hi there, Sabby. Hello, Gore. What's going on? Shout out to Ashura, says, Sabby Sabs, I'm multitasking, watching you and Jimmy. Ryan Grimm is a joke, but the Vanguard will defend Grimm tomorrow or later this week. Interesting. Okay, Eric, I'll do that as well. Shout out to Sebastian, says, hey, what's going on? Niki's World. Hello, Gamer and Ganja for Life. And Angela, you guys are getting shout outs in the chat. Oh, ZMG Ruler says, sorry, Sabby, I'm a Warriors fan. I know, isn't everybody apparently? Everyone likes the Warriors. I think they've won enough games, you guys. Come on. They've won enough championships. I think it's someone else's turn. Someone just told me Terry, go Power Rangers. Yeah, buddy. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Let's go ahead and get those comments on Rockfin. All right. Shout out to Roy on Rockfin. Hello Monday, and at Sabby and Danny HAIPHONG. What's going on? Laura says, OMG, yeah, suicides. I'm telling you, suicides are tough, man. Those are tough to do. And also, thank you for this as well, Laura. Love Danny HAIPHONG. Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to get into this discussion because I've been wanting to talk about this for a long time, but I need someone who knew more about it. Terry says, we got game 3. I hope so. This is going to be telling. I'm going to make a prediction here. And you guys can quote me on this. You can clip this. Before last night's game, I said Celtics win in 6. After last night's game, I think this is going to go to game 7. I could be wrong, but I think this is going to go 7 games. If we win game 3, I think this is going to go 7 games. Maybe I should play it that way. If we win, nope, I didn't mean to say it like that. I think I said that wrong. No. If we win game 3, I think this is still okay, regardless. If we win or lose game 3, I still think this is going to go 7 games. For some reason, I have this feeling that we're not going to win both home games. I could be wrong, but I have this feeling we're not going to win both. Then it's going to go back to Golden State. They might win at home. What is that, King of Troy? Warriors in 5? We'll see. We'll see. You know, where Celtics messed up last night, they really, number one, they were missing a lot of shots. From what I saw last night, there were a lot of bricks that were thrown. So they were missing a lot of shots there. So that's problematic. They're going to have to work on that. Jason Tatum has to get back in the game. I don't know what's going on with Jason, but he's not playing the way that he usually plays. He's not at his best. That was also for game 1 as well. Even though we won game 1, Jason Tatum was not really as much of a factor in that game in reference to scoring. He had assists, but he wasn't scoring as well like he usually does. That being said, if we're going to win this, we cannot have the mistakes that we had last night. We cannot have all these turnovers, technical fouls. And for the love of God, when we have free throws, we need to make the shots. Couple of shots last night, I noticed Jason Tatum at the free throw line was missing free throws when no one was guarding you. So yes, he's not on his A game. But if we're going to win this, we cannot make the mistakes that we made last night. Another thing I do want to point out too, you really have to stop Klay Thompson from shooting these threes. And this has been a problem ever since he's been with the Warriors. Everybody knows Klay Thompson, that's kind of like the 3-point king. If he gets the chance, if you leave him open, and they left him open a couple of times last night, if they leave him open, oh, he's raining threes all night. So we can't have that happen. Whoever was blocking Steph Curry, I have to go back and watch the video because I can't remember who was blocking him. Whoever was guarding Steph Curry last night, I think they might need to switch that up. I think you may need to put somebody else on Steph Curry because based on what I saw last night, they weren't able to guard him. He was all over the place. So that would need to change, or that player would have to get better at guarding Steph Curry. You cannot leave him open. He is going to score. What else did I notice that was somewhat problematic? We need to work on getting our own rebounds. There were multiple times where we had missed shots, but we had people right there underneath the basket that they should have been able to jump up and get those rebounds. And Golden State was like killing us with that. Like we'd shoot, it wouldn't make it. We get a brick. Here comes Golden State. Boom, I got your rebound and I'm gone. So need to work on that as well. Double team Steph. Yes, that's a good idea too, Terry. Even if you need to double team him, you got to do something because last night he was just running free. He was running free. Oh my gosh. No, Gary, the Celtics don't suck. If they suck, they wouldn't have made it this far. Let's think about all the people that they had to beat to get here, right? Where Pilgrim says, put Sabby in as assistant coach. I played basketball. That's why I know, like, I think if you've played it and you're watching a basketball game, it's easier to see where the mistakes and the errors are. And so as someone who's played basketball, that's what our coach would do. If you didn't mesh up well with someone, they would swap you out and put someone else in. I also think they might need to give Jason Tatum, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but maybe less time on the court because I felt like Jason Tatum last night, it was obvious he was tired and they still had him in. So I felt like he needed a break. So that's my take on that. And Danny is here. So here we go.
Hey, hi, Sabby.
Danny, welcome back.
Loving the Celtics commentary. Heartbroken after last night. As you already know, that I'm a Celtics fan. So really frustrating last night. And I also played basketball too. So I am just thinking, the turnovers, you can't turn the ball over that many times in a game and win. You can't have your best player turn the ball over that many times and win a game. It just doesn't happen. So
that's what I was just telling them. I'm like, for those of us that played basketball, it's easier to see all the mistakes that were made last night, but it was brutal. I was like, oh my God, this is terrible.
And I always wondered if suicides, they were named that because you want to do harm to yourself after doing them too many times because you're just in so much pain. That's how it feels. Like, if you if you have tough coaches, which most are, you'll be in a lot of pain after a game like last night.
Agreed. Yeah, that was tough. All right, guys. So my special guest tonight is Danny HAIPHONG. He's the host of The Left Lens, and he's a contributor for the Black Agenda Report. Welcome back, Danny. It's been a minute.
Yeah. Sorry for the delay. Things have been crazy, especially of late for me, but just generally, it's been a very busy time, but I'm glad to be back. I really enjoy it.
Woohoo! I have to tell you, every time I see a tweet from you, you can tell people what happened with Twitter too if you want to. But like every time I see a tweet from you, I'm like, Boston, because you're like the only other person I know in like left independent media that's like from here.
Yeah, I saw someone in the chat asking if there was good Indian food. I'm from Cambridge, so I would really recommend the Palestinians food out in Cambridge. There's actually a really good coffee house, Andala Coffee House, that has incredible Palestinian food, especially the pastries. But just so if you're ever in Cambridge, go there. And it's been there forever. And, you have Noam Chomsky and all kinds of other people doing events there, because it's a Palestinian-owned bakery, coffee house. And they're down. They're down for the Palestinian cause.
The best one I know of in Cambridge is called India Pavilion. They're really good.
Yeah. There's one on Prospect Street in Mid Cambridge, but I don't. It's fine. I don't even remember the name of it, but it's just like it's fine. It's not anything that I would get very often.
All right, Danny. So I'm glad you could come on. I've been wanting to talk about this whole conflict with China and Taiwan for a while, but I told my audience multiple times, I was like, I have to get Danny to come on for that because I don't know as much about that as you do. So I guess to start this off, I do want to ask, like, where did this all come from? What started this whole conflict to begin with?
Sure. Well, if you listen to what China has to say, mainland China, the People's Republic of China, their government, they would say that the conflict is manufactured, that it's really a U.S. instigated conflict, that it is one where there has been a lot of political developments that have been very unfortunate, that have gotten in the way of reunification, peaceful reunification between the Taiwan Straits and China. And what is, I think, very important to note about this conflict is that it really stems from a violation of many, 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 many different agreements that has the U.S. at its heart. So just a bit of history about Taiwan in particular. So Taiwan has been considered part of China since like the 12th century. It's like a very key part of China as it has been known as a civilization. But in 1894, there was a war. There was a Japanese invasion. And in that invasion, after a year of just absolute brutality, Japan colonized Taiwan. And for about 50 years and at the end of World War II, Japan just massacred indigenous people and just wreaked havoc on the island in order to serve its own maritime interests, its own economic interests. It's very typical of colonialism. But during World War II, Japan suffered heavy losses and had to sign what was called the Cairo Declaration, which said that Japan would listen to the United States, the UK, and China and cede back all of the colonized territory back to China. So essentially, Taiwan would become, once again, China proper. In 1945, that was enforced by the Potsdam Declaration. And after that, what ended up happening was on mainland China, there was a revolution in 1949. So after 1949, all of these declarations, these World War II declarations, were essentially ignored by the United States because there was a huge fear on the part of the U.S. political establishment that China was lost to communism. And the United States had already been engaged in building up a Cold War with the Soviet Union at the time. And so having China, which was a very populous country, I think over 500 million people at that time. Now, of course, it's 1.4 billion people. This population is immensely grown, but the idea of China and the Soviet Union both being socialist countries led by communist parties was just an utter nightmare. So the United States decided that it would violate all of the agreements that it had set into motion, right? Helping the KMT government, which was the nationalist government in China, and helping also the People's Liberation Army, which was fighting also against Japanese aggression during World War II. The United States essentially violated its agreements and began what has been now a more than half-century long process of militarizing Taiwan. And so the United States began pumping Taiwan, which had been occupied by the ousted nationalist government, the KMT-led government. That was the political party that was overthrown during the Chinese Revolution in 1949. It fled to Taiwan, the island, and then was supported by the United States militarily and diplomatically. And it was actually recognized as China, as the rightful government of China by the United Nations because of US influence for 22 years after 1949. In 1971, the United Nations finally gave the People's Republic of China back its seat on the United Nations. And in Resolution 2758, that resolution stated that Taiwan and China were one, that Taiwan was part of China, and 180 plus countries recognized that. So this conflict, right, stems from a historic violation of many different international agreements that have been made over the last 70 years. And the United States has, ever since 1971, ever since even the normalization of relations between the US and China, has used Taiwan as kind of a launching pad to militarize the region, to provoke China, and to go against these agreements in order to enforce its interests and try to weaken China, and ultimately, as this new Cold War and all of its strategic objectives, what they carry forward is the hope that the U.S. will maintain its hegemony. And so even in the last 20 years alone, there's been more than $15 billion worth of arms sales to Taiwan. The United States supports the ruling party in Taiwan right now, which is the Democratic Progressive Party. There's nothing progressive about it. It's a separatist party. It's a party that really leans on Washington, does whatever Washington really wants it to do. It has an objective of making Taiwan an independent country, completely against all of these international treaties and laws that have been signed over the years and are recognized by virtually every country in the world. And really, it's all about creating division. And Taiwan is probably the most important piece in this new Cold War, where the United States is not just militarizing Taiwan. There's like a $14 billion backlog of military weapons that the United States is ready to just dump on that island. It's not just about that. It's also about militarizing the whole region, the Taiwan Straits, the South China Sea, the entire Asia Pacific, with U.S. military bases, U.S. weaponry, U.S. personnel. And that's why we've seen, since the Obama administration, more than half of the military budget, more than half of all U.S. military assets, the 60% of the U.S. Navy, all going to this region. It's all part of a coordinated campaign to contain China, quote unquote, and to what the United States believes is to win the world, right? To continue U.S. domination, continue U.S. hegemony, and ultimately help reproduce U.S. imperialist domination in a time where it's very shaky, because China is on the rise. China has a lot of advantages economically, politically in the region, and also the rest of the world. And these two countries are on completely different paths politically and economically. And Taiwan is really a flashpoint in order to instigate a crisis. And this has been going on for quite a long time. Daniel Ellsberg actually revealed within the last year, I believe it was last year, that the United States was seeking nuclear war right after the Chinese Revolution, seeking nuclear war. It was hoping to place nuclear warheads on Taiwan Island and shoot them at mainland China. I mean, that's how deep this conflict goes, how deep the U.S.'s involvement is. And it's rarely talked about like this because the narrative that the Western media likes to push out is that China is the aggressor. China is seeking to dominate the island. Now there's this comparison between Taiwan and Ukraine, which is absolutely ludicrous and ridiculous. It's a completely different situation. But the one similarity here is that the United States, similar to what happened in Ukraine, instigating, interfering politically, the United States is doing that in Taiwan. It just so happens that Taiwan is not an independent country. It is part of China, and it is recognized as such by the vast majority of the international community.
So how can China, like technically, if Taiwan is a part of China, then technically, how can China invade a country that's already a part of China? So that goes back to some of the talking points that I'm hearing from mainstream media and Joe Biden himself, who said that recently, I think it was a couple of days ago, that if China were to invade Taiwan, that the United States government would get involved and back Taiwan. But technically, you can't invade a country that's already a part of your country.
And that's exactly right. So China treats Taiwan, and it has done so ever since the Chinese Revolution, right? It has treated Taiwan as kind of similar to how Hong Kong is an administrative region of China, so it is slightly different. But in terms of the orientation toward Taiwan, China has treated Taiwan as sort of like a one country, two systems model, right? Mm-hmm. So Taiwan is considered part of China. And of course, there's a very complex history, a lot of political differences. And so China has allowed Taiwan to continue its system. And really, the whole move forward has been peaceful reunification. That's the goal, to integrate Taiwan and China as close together as possible economically and in all sorts of other areas, because there are a lot of ties, right? I mean, we're talking about an island that has centuries, right? Centuries upon centuries worth of history, families that have bonds with each other on both sides, right? So there's a lot of interest in peacefully reunifying. But when Biden made these comments, and that was the third time he has made such comments, the third time he has said, if China invades, quote unquote, Taiwan, then the United States would intervene militarily. When he says these comments, basically what he's doing is he's throwing out basically 50 years of U.S.-China diplomatic relations, right? He's from the 1972 joint communique all the way to the 1992 consensus, all of which state that the United States recognizes one China. It recognizes that Taiwan is part of China. Essentially, what Biden is doing is throwing that out in favor of U.S. hegemonic, U.S. militarist interests, because really what saying such a thing is all about is nothing to do. It has nothing to do with facts of the matter, with will China actually invade Taiwan. It's all about feeding the military-industrial complex, because what the military-industrial complex is doing is dumping old weaponry, dumping all sorts of useless machine parts and tanks and all kinds of weapons that are really unusable in combat. They don't care about Taiwan actually getting into a conflict with China. From China to the United States, military experts on both sides understand that if Taiwan were to be engaged in a conflict militarily with China, that it would lose it very quickly, because none of these weapons are actually usable. So in retrospect, a lot of this is just the military-industrial complex taking advantage of a political situation that the Biden administration and, of course, subsequent administrations have really built up, which is this sort of anti-China, new Cold War policy, all about competition, all about domination, how to stop China's rise by using Taiwan as just one of its launching pads. The real important launching pad, because it has a lot of ramifications propaganda-wise too, by propagandizing to people in the West, the United States, that Taiwan is being like oppressed by China, that it's part of this overall aggression that China is waging in its own territory, within its own country, technically. But it really is part of this overall strategy. And when Biden says these things, you might notice that he always has to walk them back. Or if he's not walking them back, it's Antony Blinken that's walking them back, or it's someone within the Department of State walking them back, because it's a very delicate situation. It's a very dangerous one. I argue that it is far more dangerous to try to provoke a conflict militarily with China over Taiwan than it is with trying to provoke a conflict with Russia over Ukraine. The stakes are even higher. The potential for nuclear disasters even higher, and the potential for a worldwide economic crisis, which we are in because of the US's actions toward Russia over Ukraine, are even more stark and even more troubling. So that's why you see the walking back, because the US actually, despite its chest thumping about Taiwan and about China, it doesn't really have much leverage here because of just how delicate the situation is and how any wrong move, incorrect move, could set things back for the world very, very far.
Well said, Danny. And I do want to let everyone know, when we say like military industrial complex, we don't just mean the military. That also means like weapons manufacturers. That includes companies like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman. Like, it's important for people to know that this is a business. They make money off of it. And then also it's another reason to justify having an expensive military budget, right? Like, what was it? $758 billion for the military industrial complex. So it justifies that you have to have some type of conflict going on. Like, otherwise they don't have a way to explain like why we have to have such a large military budget. I do want to get your opinion about, in reference to China, because a lot of my students are from China, or excuse me, were from China. And one of the things that I've noticed is they would explain to me how things were back home. And they would talk about how I could go back to, when I'm done with school, I go back to China and I'm pretty much guaranteed a job just because I got a degree here in the United States. And they were telling me just how like millennials are living in China. They're like, yeah, you know, housing is great, and talking about like job guarantees. And these are things that we don't really have here in the United States. And I wanted to get your opinion about that. Do you think that the Biden administration is more troubled, and actually Trump too, because he fearmongered about China as well? Do you feel like they're more concerned about the fact that China is basically gotten to the point where they can kind of take care of their own country and not necessarily depend on the United States? Whereas the United States, we still heavily depend on China.
Yeah, well, I think that the way that the world situation is developing, what's happening is that China actually, for the first time, I think, in history, right? It's not just that it's a sovereign country, but it's a powerful sovereign country. And it's a sovereign country that has a socialist system at its base. It does have a private economy. It does have a partial private economy. It does have a market-based, especially consumer goods, economic system. At least that section of its economic system. But for the first time in the, let's say, since the World War II era, when the anti-colonial movement, national liberation movements, and you had a real robust and powerful movement against colonialism and foreign domination, Western domination, for the first time in history, you have a country like China who's been through that experience and is now a powerful country on the world stage. It's not just that it has sovereignty, right? Venezuela has sovereignty. Venezuela is doing very good things. But Venezuela does not have the political position or the economic strength at the moment, for many different reasons, that China has. So China is in a particular position that has been part of a strategy of protecting the revolution. Not many people see it like this, but one of the reasons why China integrated in the world economy beginning in the mid to late 1970s was because it was looking to protect, right, its development path, induce and learn and be able to, in a world that was rapidly going the way of neoliberal capitalism, looking to both protect socialism and also integrate in a world economy that was fast changing, and with the sort of understanding that you cannot have socialism with poverty, right? And Vietnam and other countries have taken this, and now Cuba and even Venezuela and a lot of other countries are going in this direction too, understanding that you need to use all the tools at the disposal to eliminate and eradicate poverty in very complex and difficult world conditions. So a huge reason why the United States is hostile towards China is because it is in a particular position. As you said, China, people who, and it's gotten a lot more intense, right? What you state and observe with those who you know from China who say they can go back, they're millennials, they can go back and get a job. There's both that aspect and also the fact that now, unlike even just 30 years ago in the 1990s, now China has such a powerful economy in that's planned in many important respects, in most of the important respects, that it's both that there are economic opportunities and there's a reason to go back. It's not that the United States can offer similarly good opportunity. It's not that people from China or really anywhere from the Asia Pacific region will be treated well in the United States. All of that American dreaming kind of ideology has gone out the window for even the most professional classes, people who come here to get into the professions, to make some money. Now it's like, no, China is built up such a strong domestic market that it can reabsorb those who went away. And that's been part of the strategy of because it's been a big problem for China, especially as its industry was developing. Even just 30 years ago, it was a lot of people were leaving because the wages were much lower. That has changed dramatically. Wages, especially in areas like high tech and even in factories, have gone way up. Even the CEO of Apple will tell he's told the media, China's not a low-wage country anymore. You cannot rely on China to be your factory for the world and expect to make super profits in the same way. That's one of the reasons why the United States is so angry, is because China has progressed in this way. And it's done so in a manner that actually helps not just the Chinese people, but it really does help the world. When you have a country this large, when you have a country this important to the world economy, meeting such goals like eliminating extreme poverty, like becoming a high-tech powerhouse, and also investing through the state, through the government. I mean, think about how powerful this example is, being able to meet those markers and then invest trillions. I mean, we're talking about trillions of RMB going both into global infrastructure development plans, cooperating with countries all over the world, including the poorest countries in the global south, and also being able to invest that same kind of infrastructure in China, where now it's a leader in all sorts of things: renewable energy, high-speed rail, all of the different public transit, all of it, right? China is leading there. So I think this is often what's not talked about, is how that quote-unquote threat of a good example is what really bothers the United States, because the United States understands that finance, right? Big finance capital, these private equity hedge fund managers, these parasites on the real economy, they don't want that kind of investment, because that kind of investment takes output. You need to put out before you get back, and they complain about it all the time. Can't have high-speed rail because it costs X, Y, Z, and you're not going to get it back, right? So that mentality, right, of just wanting to make super profits and reap as much as possible for the very rich, has left the United States behind in so many ways. And China's model is, sure, a few people can get rich, but the good of the society must be maintained. It must be put first. And when the rich become too emboldened, then they must be brought to heel, to use Hillary Clinton. They must be held accountable. And that's what's been happening in China, especially in the last 10 years. There has been an anti-corruption campaign. There has been a real clampdown on any kind of monopolization and exploitation of people through those monopolies. And now there's a whole trend toward common prosperity, a whole project toward common prosperity, which is to really address the kind of sharp edges of what the private economy, despite giving all kinds of consumer goods and allowing for a really diverse economy in China, getting rid of the worst elements of that. How do you address the corruption? How do you address the income inequality? How do you address things like private education, right? Which is very damaging to mental health, very damaging to the ability for just students and parents and families to want to stay in the game, to want to like continue on this process because of high stress, money, financial concerns. All of that is on the table to be addressed. And so it's this kind of framework that I think the United States has huge issues with, because should it continue, I mean, it is going to continue, right? Should China's economic growth continue, should its prominence on the world stage continue, then more and more people are going to understand what's going on here, right? That there are divergent paths, and perhaps it's not China that's the enemy. Perhaps it's that the United States is really on a crash course toward disaster, and really we're already living in the catastrophe of it.
Yes, I really do feel like we're like in late stage capitalism here, at least in the United States, especially with everything going on with inflation, the pandemic, everything that's happened the past, I would say 2.5 years. It's just been an eye opener, I think, to some people. I want to touch on something you mentioned about the poverty situation, because the fact that China has almost like fully eradicated poverty in their country, I want to explain to people too that they do not have a high crime rate like we do here in the United States. And that's why I always link the two, that a lot of crime is poverty driven. And we could do the same thing here in the US. We could also try to eradicate poverty, but the US government response seems to be, let's fund the police. We need more cops. Like, that is actually going to curb crime, which we know that's not true. Obviously, look at the situation with the Texas school shooting. The police didn't even intervene the way that they should have. So I feel like the US government has it backwards. They think that the way to curb crime is to implement more law enforcement. Whereas you have a country like China that obviously saw poverty is an issue. Let's fix the poverty issue. Thus, they don't have the crime rate we have, and they don't have as many people in prison that we have. And they have more people.
Yeah, it's less than half of the China has less than half of the prison population of the United States, despite having nearly 5 times the population. So yeah, no, it's quite a stark contrast. And in terms of poverty, I mean, this was the central mission of the Chinese Revolution, right? The Chinese Revolution wasn't waged for nothing, right? It was waged because there was abject poverty in China. China was probably the poorest, if not one of the poorest countries in the world. You could maybe compare India because of what British colonialism and imperialism did to India, still is doing to India. But when you think about China's situation in 1949, it was probably the poorest country in the world, with absolutely horrific rates of death from malnutrition, infant mortality. Life expectancy was one of the lowest in the world, even at that time. So it wasn't waged for nothing. It was a majority peasant country, majority rural agrarian country, still is a huge population of the country. And so it was waged not because they're like bad communists or whatever, like evil communists seeking to take power. It was waged because poverty was a central issue. In China, people call it the century of humiliation, the century prior to the Chinese Revolution. It was a humiliating period where foreign powers, the U.S. was involved in this, not as directly, but you had Great Britain, the British Empire. You had all sorts of imperialist countries carving it up, Japan, etc., carving up China, and creating just devastating economic conditions, political conditions. And so that's really the roots of the Chinese Revolution, is fighting that, is resisting that. And after the Chinese Revolution, it's been still a struggle. Just because you have socialism doesn't mean that poverty just goes away. It takes a lot of work. I mean, we're talking about a country that had zero industry, zero, nothing. It was a plundered, looted country. It was a country that had more opium production than any other kind of production in 1949, right? So you have to address that situation and then move forward in hostile world conditions, in a hostile world situation. I said the United States didn't just kick the People's Republic of China out of the United Nations. It didn't just say, no, the People's Republic of China can't sit on the UN. It created a technology and economic blockade of China. So China didn't have access to a lot of the tools until 1979, when normalization of relations happened between the United States and China. It didn't have the tools that it needed, the access to the market that it needed to build up a heavy industry for a massive population to be able to meet the needs of the people. And so after 1979, poverty became a huge mission of the Chinese government to alleviate and eventually eradicate. And so it was first, because poverty was so extreme for so many, it was first to fight against extreme poverty. You've got to raise the standard of living for the poorest people. You've got to raise the conditions up for poor rural workers, poor rural families who have been living in destitution. And that's what China has invested an incredible amount of resources in. And then over the last decade, China wiped away the last 99 million people who remained in this kind of poverty. We're talking about people who don't have access to housing, to clean plumbing, to things that, you know, in the United States, we don't necessarily always think about, even though I think we should, because there's plenty of extreme poverty here. But we're talking about people who did not have what China calls the 3 assurances and 2 guarantees: access to education, housing, clothing, food, medical care, right? These things were not available because people were working in remote conditions just to live a subsistence, you know, just to make subsistence, just to be able to eat enough to live the next day. And so China has eradicated that condition. Now, what China says, the fight is now against relative poverty, because just because you have those things doesn't mean that you have everything you need and then want in order to live a whole and fulfilling life. So the struggle still continues, but the fact that China has eradicated extreme poverty for 850 plus million people since 1980, accounting for nearly all of the poverty alleviation of that period in the entire world, I think says something quite remarkable about what they've been able to achieve.
There's a couple questions here. Robert says, but do people in Taiwan consider themselves to be a part of China? That's a good question.
Yeah. So oftentimes the polls that are taken, even by like Taiwan-based sources, right, academic institutions, they talk about the status quo. And what that means is that the status quo is that Taiwan is part of China, but it's kind of like this one country, 2 systems model. It's this model where they're not unified politically, but there's a recognition of the one China principle. And still the vast majority want that. Now, I am going to say, and this is definitely true, that because of the political situation, especially since 2000, when the Democratic Progressive Party has made a lot of gains and eventually took the presidency in Taiwan not too long after that, since then, there has been a campaign to spread separatism and hostility toward mainland China, toward the People's Republic of China. And so independent sentiment has definitely grown. And so it's quite easy to see why that would happen when you have both political changes. The KMT, the former Nationalist Party, has become the minority party, no longer is the ruling party. You also have the fact that the United States has escalated and stepped up its military and political campaign to create these hostilities. And given the influence that the United States has in Taiwan, it's not hard to see why political shifts would happen in people's consciousness. And then there's the fact the Democratic Progressive Party, the Separatist Party, has actually waged like a campaign, kind of like a book burning campaign. There actually is a huge campaign to create a Taiwanese identity, and do so at a very early age. So over the past generation, 2 generations, what this party has done through its political power is it has erased all that history I talked about in the beginning, even dating back to the nationalists, even uniting with the communists, which happened for a period. Didn't last very long, but it happened for a period when they were fighting Japanese aggression. That has been scrubbed from the history books. There is a campaign to get rid of all of that, to sort of de-educate and miseducate masses of people, the new generation, the younger generation, into supporting a Taiwanese identity, a separatist identity, and going against the status quo. Because for so long in Taiwan, even though Taiwan, the Republic of China, which is the KMT's sort of name for what China was when it ruled, the Republic of China it viewed itself and mainland China as part of one China. It just thought that it was the rightful government of that China, right? But what the DPP, what the ruling party wants to do is it wants to say, no, we are not the Republic of China. We are not just the rightful government. We are a separate country, a separate identity. You will even have Tsai Ing-wen, who's the president of this DPP party. She has gone on Foreign Policy Magazine and other Western media and said that the Taiwanese identity is akin to the European identity. I mean, this is how this is like a colonialist mentality. It's all about creating separation from the savage Chinese. It mimics the Hong Kong opposition. If I don't know if your followers, they probably have followed sort of the work that I have done, others have done, in the character of the Hong Kong protest opposition that really jumped off into that really was all, you know, getting all the attention in 2019, but it dates back many, many years, where there is this US-backed, US-funded opposition, which has extremely, not only just pro-Western views, but very racist views toward They view people in mainland China to be savages. And that's because China, as I said before, is majority agrarian, majority peasantry, still has a huge population, right? Despite all of its economic gains. I mean, you know, Taiwan needs China economically. So this is all suicidal. Let's be really real here. Taiwan absolutely is committing economic and political suicide by pursuing a path of separatism. There's absolutely no interest in it for Taiwan or the people there. It would be absolutely a disaster, right? It would be left out on its own, and I don't know what would happen to it. It would become some kind of vassal austerity state of the United States or something. But nonetheless, right? This is all a political move. It's all about viewing China, the Chinese, the mainland Chinese, as kind of like these others, these inferiors, and that's what Taiwanese identity is really based on, at least when it comes to how the ruling party is doing things. And so there is a shift in sentiment on the island. It's a troubling one, but it's one that we can see where it comes from. And it's one that still hasn't gained such a foothold where there's even close to a majority who want it, right? Still very small. You know, it depends on there's different versions of this. Some people say they want the status quo and they never want independence. Some people say they want to move toward independence. You know, so there's versions of it, but most people in the main want the status quo. They don't want it to break off. But with the younger generations, this is something that is going to have to be dealt with, right? How growing up, right? It's like growing up in America, growing up anywhere else, growing up, what the things you have learned, the environment you've lived in, a certain political environment, you start to adopt ideas that, even if they're against your interests, it's just what you think is the truth. And that's kind of what's happening in Taiwan. And it's going to cause problems. But I think the political thrust, right, China's influence, the fact that the US's efforts are so desperate in a lot of ways, so dangerous too, it remains to be seen on how all of this will go. But it's really likely that I think we should all sort of, if we have a sober mind, we can see that China's pursuit of peaceful reunification is much more likely than the United States' suicidal attempt to cause conflict between the two militarily. It would be an absolute and utter catastrophe. Now, just because I say it's a lot more likely that peaceful reunification will win out, doesn't mean that the United States isn't a rabid imperialist state that may just do the unthinkable, kind of like what we didn't think would happen when it came to Russia and Ukraine. The United States kind of did instigate the unthinkable. So who knows? But for me, at least in terms of where the legitimacy lies, it lies in peaceful reunification. There's absolutely no other, I think, goal here that makes any sense for the vast majority. For those who have political interests and have, you know, high hopes that the United States' domination will serve them, well, that's you know, they will be in the minority, I think, when all of this is said and done, because it's a very, I mean, it's a very delicate situation and a very difficult one.
Yeah, what you said about their opinion about the mainland Chinese population, it kind of reminds me about the Aborigines in Australia, about how not all Australians, but how some Australians feel about the Aborigines population there, and they are the indigenous population in Australia.
Yeah, and the one thing about Taiwan is that by the time Japanese colonialism was through, and this was a process that was happening even before Japanese colonialism, there was a real assault on the indigenous population there. It's very small. Like Taiwan has an indigenous population, but it's incredibly small now because of how it's been decimated over the course of the centuries prior to all of this conflict that we're talking about, right, between China and the ruling party in Taiwan. Way prior to that, there was a decimate. A lot of these politics come out of, unfortunately, that kind of history, and so it's really unfortunate. But at the same time, over the past 20, 30 years, Taiwan has been on this kind of like liberalization, becoming a kind of Western style democracy through this separatist movement. And I think that there is so many contradictions here that I don't think that they can be resolved through the US's military aims and their own kind of projected on like colonialist aims, imperialist aims, in that, through this liberalization and economic development in Taiwan, it's become like one of the major producers of semiconductor chips, which are incredibly important for all high technology. And China has basically all of this high technology. They're so wedded economically. It's just any kind of conflict instigated by the United States through Taiwan would have such economic ramifications that it's like really hard to fathom, right? It's like it may not seem like a huge deal just saying it, but it would really cause the global economy to basically come to a halt. And what we see with Russia and Europe, for example, I mean, that would intensify many, many, many times, because a cascading effect of trying to split that economic relationship apart, if it has any success, would really ripple down everywhere. If you think inflation is bad now and corporations are trying to take everything now, just wait till they're running, because because there is such an economic crisis produced by militarism. They will take more, and it will be, it'll be a real overall world crisis. So I think that's the significance of the Taiwan sort of China, they call it the cross straits relations, right? It's a really important issue, and it's one that I don't think gets talked about in a manner that's respectful to how significant it really is to the world.
Well said. I have two more questions for you, Danny. The first one is, I was reading like recently, apparently China is trying to help parts of Africa with their infrastructure. And the only concern I have about that is I have this feeling that this is going to end up being a debt that's owed that they are not going to be able to pay back. Do you feel that China is acting in good faith here? Or do you feel like they are going to be looking for some type of return on their investment?
Well, I think it's both. So China doesn't give out conditional loans because actually the IMF model is actually based on conditional loans. A lot of people think it's like you get money, you got to get back money. Actually, a lot of them are called conditional because they have no necessarily stipulations to pay back the debt directly. But instead, what the IMF says is you can have this money and it may increase your debt. You don't have to pay it back in money. You can pay it back through austerity. You can pay it back through allowing more market access. You can pay it back through basically becoming an economic vassal of multinational corporations in Wall Street. So it's not a direct money-to-money relationship. It's that debt continues to compound, and the demands of the IMF for other things it become greater and greater and greater. So China doesn't do that. China doesn't say, give us your ports, give us your financial institutions, give us your land. Doesn't do that. It does say, we're engaged in a financial relationship. We're loaning money so that we can come, our private companies can come, or our state-owned companies can come. We can collaborate with your companies and your workers, and we can build something. So there's a financial relationship there. But China is very flexible with these economic arrangements. I mean, this is all through China. And this is one thing people don't recognize, is that, well, there's private economic activity that is facilitated in Africa through private companies. Not all of them are private, but there's a lot of private companies from China who go to Africa and engage in business. But the loans that are provided are through China's Exim Bank, the Export-Import Bank. That's a state-owned bank. And so that bank has imperatives that are dictated by the Chinese government. And so these loans are very flexible. During the COVID-19 pandemic, China actually paused and then forgave the loans, I think, of 19 African countries, right, that were engaged in infrastructure projects. And so this is a regular occurrence between China and its African partners, those governments that it is partnering with to build things like stadiums and to build roads, to build telecommunications, right, to build huge railways like that was built between Djibouti and Ethiopia, right. To build these projects, it takes flexibility. And so China has been more than willing to renegotiate, to pause, to delay payments, to stop interest on the loans. This has been a regular occurrence. So I'm not so worried that China is going to one day say, you got to pay us all, you got to pay all of this back. But China is not going to also say, yeah, you don't have to pay us back. There is an economic arrangement here, but because the relationship is not one of dependency, right? The hope is that not that African governments have to pay back more than they have, or not that African countries have to pay back more than they have. It's that through the development, this cooperation, this economic growth that comes from the development, that there's more of a capacity to pay back, and also, right, have the domestic economies of these countries grow further and further, so that they can meet their own aims, right? China has a literal development strategy called South-South cooperation that is all about ensuring that China's economic partnerships with African countries, global South countries, Latin America, and in Asia, etc., that these relationships are fair and that they are about the literal rising tide lifts all boats kind of orientation, not the fantasy that Bill Clinton used to utter, right, talking about neoliberalism, but the reality of, if you can engage in modernization and the development of key infrastructure so that your economy works better. Because if you don't have any roads, if you don't have any electricity, which China has invested massive amounts of investment to develop Africa, the entire continent's electrical grid, right, in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, right, massive investments over the past several decades. If you do that, then not only will China benefit from these investments, but African countries will be able to engage in real economic activity, not the plunder that has occurred there, where Western corporations, through the international financial system, through the back of the international financial system, come into African countries, steal all of the resources, all of the land, all of the economic means of production, and then basically take them away back to the imperialist countries, and essentially leave African countries indebted and dependent upon monocultural and single crop kind of economic arrangements, which leaves the entire country and much of the continent in a state of poverty that's absolutely ridiculous, given that Africa is probably the richest place in the world in terms of natural resources. I think in the Democratic Republic of Congo alone, there's enough arable land there to feed the entire world, I think 3 generations over, or something absolutely insane like that. So this is not what China is looking for. It's not doing that with African countries. And if it were, African countries would have absolutely no reason to invest with China. No, why would it invest with China if it was doing that? Could just invest with Europe and the United States, right? There would be no interest. But the fact that China's investment in Africa in trade and infrastructure development dwarfs the United States by something like 10 times, right? I think there's over 250, $300 billion worth of investment that China is doing with African countries versus something like 30 billion by the United States. I think shows that African countries understand who's a better partner, who's more fair, who's providing 5G technology, the capacity to build public transit, the capacity to have electrical grids, the capacity to also maybe pursue climate change targets, to maybe be able to address the pandemic, right? African countries, I think, understand this, while the United States and its international financial system, European countries, they're not doing that. France still owns the currencies, I think, of 14 West African states. Like, it's still a neocolonialist arrangement. China has not done any of that. China said, we want to offer as fair as possible economic arrangements that can serve both sides. And while it's not always perfect, it certainly provides an alternative to this absolutely parasitic Western-dominated financial system that has terrorized Africa for centuries now.
All right, Danny, I have one more question for you. And actually, someone brought this up in the chat, but I was going to ask this question anyway. The one-child policy, in your opinion, do you feel that's something that has helped China, or do you feel that's hurt China?
Well, I think the one-child policy, just like any policy as in China, it's all about the economic plan, right? So the one-child policy was put into place because there was rapid population growth in China. And unfortunately, there was just not enough resources in order to be able to address the needs of the people. So in a real, I guess, kind of economic reality sense of the terms, I don't know if we would say it helped China, but it did, I think, allow China to be able to bide time as it, because a lot of this, the one-child policy, right, this is kind of the end of history moment. This is like the fall of the socialist bloc. There was a very delicate economic situation globally. Socialism was unfortunately on the decline worldwide. And so there was a real delicate situation that China had to address. That it still didn't really have industry. It still had a very rural population, a very peasant sort of oriented population. And so there needed to be controls in order to allow China to develop and be able to catch up with the population, right? To be able to catch, because usually what happens when there's a boom economically, the population also booms, right? And then it falls when people understand what it's like to live in a much more highly developed society. This is one of the reasons why Adrian Zenz, for example, goes crazy about China's family planning policies and calls it genocide, because now China has a robust family planning system after, years, decades and decades of development, because now, women have more opportunities. There are more jobs now. There is more economic opportunities. Usually when people have the experience, especially women, of living through that, what ends up happening is that birth rates fall and different decisions are made, and there is more demand for something. It happened in the United States. Roe v. Wade, we talk about all the time. One of the big impetus for that was the fact that women were now entering the workforce. Women were pursuing careers. Women wanted to have more freedom. They didn't want to just be, domestic workers anymore, making nothing and sitting at home and taking care of families. They wanted options, right? They wanted to maybe we can do both. Maybe we can have a kid later. All of those things start to factor into the equation. And I think the one-child policy was all about, now it's three-child policy for ethnic minorities, two-child policy, I think, for everyone else. It's all about having the economy catch up with the population growth so that resources that were once sparse can be developed and increased so that they're not so sparse anymore, and the population can be accounted for as best as possible. It's not perfect. It's not, it's not ideal, certainly, right? If we could just wave a magic wand and get rid of these problems, we would. But this was sort of the real situation confronting China in a end of the Cold War, coming close to the post-Cold War period. And it was something that was endured, and now it's changing dramatically. And now you even have, right, family planning policies being called genocide by, these stenographers for the State Department of State, like Adrian Zenz.
Danny, thanks so much for coming on. I do have to ask you really quick. I was looking. Do we have the same microphone? I think we do.
Yeah, we do. The pod mic.
So do I have this the right way? Should I have it like yours?
Well, I have a mic stand now, courtesy of Q Anthony Omin. I don't know if you know him, but he suggested I get this. And so I think you're using the mic stand, right? The one you put on a table. I used to use that all the time too. Yeah. I don't use it as much anymore because I bought this like cheap mic stand from, let me show in front of the camera, this like cheap, get it on Amazon. I'm still in need of figuring out how to like when I do interviews on things like CGTN or like RT, like they're like, the mic's in your way, you need to like put the mics, but it really works. I think it was only like $20 something. So, if you wanted to change up the setup, but no, it's the right, it's the right way. I think I'm not an audio expert, but yeah, I think it's the right way. You sound good. So if people don't mind looking at the mic, I don't.
Yeah, because I didn't realize I could use it that way. Like I'm looking at you have it like vertical. I didn't realize I could use it that way. But someone told me the same thing too. They said the mic is blocking your face, and I'm like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, I sympathize because I get these kind of comments all the time from people want to be helpful. So I appreciate the suggestions, but it's like, oh God, it's stressful. Got to think about that too. But yeah, you just untwist the mic from the thingamajig and it will go into I think most mic stands, but maybe I can look at it and just send you it by email or something. It's cheap, but it does the job. It feels like it's going to tilt sometimes. You got to get it just right, but it does the job. It does the job. You would,
Cool beans. All right, Danny, before you go, where can people find you?
Sure. So in a week, you can find me back on Twitter at Spirit of Ho. I've actually been banned. I'm in read-only mode. So I did a thread on Tiananmen Square on June 4th, the Tiananmen Square massacre. I won't get into the details of that. You can just follow me on Instagram, Danny HAIPHONG, and find that thread. But you can find me at Spirit of Ho. You can go there, follow me, and then I'll be back 6 days. I'm on Telegram, the HAIPHONG Press. I'm trying to promote that more because I'm going to be posting there more. So look for the HAIPHONG Press. Look for my name on Telegram, Danny HAIPHONG. Follow me there. I write for Black Agenda Report weekly, so make sure that you're following that. I do want to plug, I'm a co-editor of a platform called Friends of Socialist China. I know, right? Showing my cards. I'm totally a friend of Socialist China. Sorry to say for the detractors. But if you haven't heard me talk, then, or if you've heard me talk and you didn't already know that, then you weren't listening. So, but for those who are interested, I am holding an event on June 11th, 11 a.m. Eastern. It's a webinar. Ben Norton will be there. I'll be speaking on it. A really great panel. Victor Gao, who was Deng Xiaoping's interpreter. He's also a vice president for a major NGO in China. Rob Kajiwara, Peace for Okinawa Coalition, Li Jingjing of CGTN. Just a really great panel. Chris Matalko of the South African Communist Party. We're bringing together all these folks to talk about the U.S. empire's war on multipolarity. So you want to find that in the events page. Oh, there it is. Thank you so much for bringing that up. You can find that at socialistchina.org. You can register there on the Eventbrite. So make sure that you're coming through to that on June 11th. That's Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And then other than that, other than Telegram, other than, finding me on Twitter when I'm back, you can make sure you can find me on Substack. You can subscribe there for free, chroniclesofhaifong.substack.com. I publish all of my articles there. I'm publishing about weekly still. You can find me on the Left Lens at YouTube, so subscribe to that channel. And then you can support my work at patreon.com/DannyHaiPhong. Those are the places where you can find me, where you can support me financially if you are able. But thanks so much for the time, Sabby. It was great.
Thanks, Danny. Go Celtics.
Yeah, go Celtics. I can't lie. I'm a little nervous because of the experience factor. I think the talent factor, I think it's in their favor. I think the matchups are actually in their favor. It's just about how are they going to react. I see Robert Williams out there. Sometimes I'm like, if I were on the court, I'd be like, man, he looks a little lost sometimes, you know? And so I'm worried about that. But yeah, go Celtics. It should be a fun Wednesday.
Awesome. Thanks, Danny. Talk to you later.
Bye.
All right, guys. Awesome discussion. Awesome. So let's go ahead, and I got a couple super chats I want to shout out, and then I want to go ahead and get into the other stories here. So shout out to Justin B. Thank you for the super chat. Wishing your Celtics luck. Thank you so much. And I think, Andrew, yeah, we shouted this one out. Good Indian food in Massachusetts. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. I saw recent RBN Thurs mega run. Combine what you folks talked about kamikaze campaigning with my idea about any leftist-based third parties allying on the same platform. And I think this continues here. Thank you for the super chat as well. Continuing for my last chat. If they lose, give the lost campaign funds to mutual aid groups. Doing this consistently is a constructive way to undermine the Democrats. We win anyhow. Bam. Yes. Case Study QB has talked about that as well on Call-In. I think that's a good idea. That way you still get something. Thank you for this super chat as well, AJF. Thanks to you and RBN references to MLK, Malcolm X's speech excerpts, also revealing the work of Michael Parenti. I didn't know of him until you folks. TYVM. Thank you very much. Got it. I am not good with acronyms, abbreviations. I'm not good with them. I'll just tell you guys. I'm not good with those. Thank you so much for the super chat, AJF. In 1961, President Dwight Eisenhower warned against the military-industrial complex. He wanted to include congressional in the term by the way. That's interesting. Thank you so much for that. Okay, and I think I may have a comment on Rockfin, and then I can get to the other stories. All right. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Hey, Sab, or as Gen Z sees you, the old lady. Just kidding. Don't roast me. The reason why those bashing you for not getting down with the Democratic Party, but instead going third party, is because you're now seen as the enemy because you're rooting for another party or an indie, plain and simple. So you are as much of the enemy to them as the GOP. Why? Because you are not in their party, plain and simple. In the presence of parties, we can't truly come together on issues. Therefore, the mission is to destroy you by any means necessary. See how political parties cause division and why we need to abolish them. They place concerns of your party over policy that you would otherwise be able to come together on, just like in this situation. The only true way to come together on issues is the ballot initiatives. We must somehow figure out how to overcome the problem of astroturfing when it comes to ballot initiative campaigns. The only thing I can think that would do that is building an infrastructure network of worker co-ops in every state to be the main financer of ballot initiatives that serve the public interest. Thank you so much for those tips on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. Well said. Yeah, they do. They see us, those of us at RBN, they do see us as the enemy. We're mean people. Mean people. Thank you for the super chat, Terry. Sabby, I'm content you are a fellow Celtics fan. Woohoo! Whoop, whoop. And I was a Celtics fan when we sucked. So there's that. Just something to note. All right, let's go ahead and get into our first story tonight. Now, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the talks on Twitter, but there apparently has been some type of maybe miscommunication, misunderstanding between Ryan Grimm and Jimmy Dore. And I want to start with the tweets first. So just to give you some context of what's happening here. Jimmy Dore had a stream. In that stream, I'm going to show that part of the video as well. Jimmy Dore made a reference to something that David Sirota had tweeted out. So that's where Sirota, had tweeted out. So that's where this kind of starts. But I'll get to that clip in a second. Let me show you where the tweeting started. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because this goes back to what I've said before about people taking clips that are on Twitter and not looking into the full story behind that clip, or not asking, but what is the context? And a lot of people do this, and I'll be honest, I've been guilty of doing that myself. That's why I try to do better with that now. Even if I show you a clip from Twitter, I've already looked at the original source before I show it on my show. Ryan Grimm didn't do that. So let's get to this. So this is where it all begins, ladies and gentlemen. So Ryan Grimm tweeted, let me move this over here. What perhaps most incredible about this Jimmy Dore video is that he clearly misunderstood Sirota's joke. It's an article critical of Biden's Medicare premium hike, and he writes, why did Susan Sarandon do this? He thinks Sirota is attacking Sarandon. That's actually not true, but I'll get into that in just a second. If he needs the joke explained, the point is that Dems blame things on Sarandon or other critics even when they are fully responsible, start to finish for a political decision, like needlessly hiking Medicare in an election year. Then he rants about his wife being a Democrat. Let's go on from here. He goes on to say the entire video is based on an article Lever News wrote, which Jimmy likes, but he doesn't like the joke. That also wasn't the case either, but I'll get into that. Also, not that it deserves a response, but Emily Sirota beat a corporate Democrat with establishment support to win a state house seat in Colorado in 2018. To claim somebody did that to get rich is just too absurd to contemplate. Let me go on here. Given the hours she puts in, I highly doubt it pays minimum wage. Though I think that's a reach there. I think that's a reach. Let's be real. Let me go on here. He goes on to say, just went to DM him and remembered that while he was telling his audience I was scared of him, he ignored my response at the time that I'd answer any questions he had on his show. If you watch his show, it has nothing but contempt for you. And then it goes on. He's pulling up like DMs, I guess, between him and Jimmy. Apparently, at some point, Ryan Grimm said, Jimmy, I've muted you, so I didn't see this, but somebody flagged you, did another video of me. So to answer your question of what isn't true, both of your claims in this are not true. There is no Schumer press release. If there is, produce it. And Omar is not referring to me here. So that's like from the past, apparently. I don't know. That's like from 2021. So that's random. And then something about why do you do this? I don't know what that's about. He goes on to say, Jimmy says he actually did understand it was a joke, but that Sirota was making the joke in an effort to trick people into being Democrats, and so is not entitled to make the joke. A supporter of his posted this video, not me. Okay, so let's go to the original clip. Here's the clip that Ryan Grimm shared. And this is the clip that people are basically ratioing Ryan Grimm in Ryan Grimm in his thread about. It's this video. Now, this is not to say that he made this video. I don't know where this video came from, the one that has been surfacing on Twitter. But the problem, I think, from what I've seen by the comments, the problem that I think a lot of people have is the fact that Ryan Grimm retweeted this video clip, did not look into the context of it, did not obviously see the actual video that this clip comes from, and he retweeted it And this is how rumors get started, and this is how people get smeared. He retweeted it and said, what perhaps is most incredible about this Jimmy Dore video is that he clearly misunderstood Sirota's joke. It's an article critical of Biden's medium premium hike. And he writes, why did Susan Sarandon do this? He thinks Sirota is attacking Sarandon. And that actually was not the case. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video clip. Now, this is the one that was edited. And then I'll show you Jimmy Dore's response, and I'm going to show you the actual clip. So here we go.
I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton, with same reason why I shouldn't have voted for Barack Obama, because Barack Obama was going to do the exact same shit that John McCain and Mitt Romney were going to do, but he was going to put you to sleep so you wouldn't bind. And that's exactly what happened. Barack Obama kicked 5.1 million people out of their houses while he bailed out the banks. Barack Obama took us from 2 wars to 7. Barack Obama tortured Chelsea Manning. Barack Obama built those cages, deported more Hispanics and Mexicans and Latin Americans than all the presidents combined since 1890. This is the shit that Barack Obama did. Barack Obama promised us a public option. We didn't get it. By the way, Joe Biden also promised us a public option. He was against Medicare for all, but for public option. Where is it? You ain't never getting it. In fact, you're going to lose Medicare by voting for this guy. But guys like this are going to keep telling you to do that because he gets paid when you vote for him. That's why. His wife gets paid when Democrats stay in power. His wife is an elected Democrat.
So this part right here, when he's pointing, he's referring to this tweet here by David Sirota where he said, why did Susan Sarandon do this? Okay. Now, I already know what part from this clip is missing, but just listen to the rest of it. And then I'm going to play the actual video, not a clip from Twitter, but the actual video from the show.
Of course. So if you keep listening to guys like this who get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep you inside the Democratic Party, you're going to keep being poorer and broker. Or if you listen to Shama Sawant, who actually has integrity, unlike this guy, she'll tell you the truth, unlike this guy. And the
hold on. First of all, where's the lie? Like, that's the part, even with Ryan Grimm criticizing his responses about David Sirota, where's the lie?
Truth is, the road for progressives inside the Democratic Party leads to a graveyard and less Medicare, less Social Security, more war, and lower wages. That's what voting for this fucking guy does. And this guy's telling you that because he makes money off it and doesn't give a shit how fucking broken you are. Because
again, where's the lie? It's true. We went over all this a couple days ago on my show and on RBN. This is how David Sirota, he makes his money by keeping you here. You may not like Jimmy Dore. You may not, Ryan Grimm, you may not like Jimmy Dore. Whatever it is, what it is. But where's the lie? Don't let it get to the point where your, I don't know, disgust for someone is so profound to the point where you won't even acknowledge when they're telling the truth.
He makes hundreds of thousands of dollars every fucking year off of Bernie Sanders' campaign, off of all kinds of bullshit that you have no idea about. And he'll never feel the pain of this Medicare cut. He'll never feel the pain of your Social Security cut. He does.
Michael, David Sirota voted for Joe Biden. He said that himself. So just want to go ahead and clear that up. I don't know if he's voted for third party in the past, but he did vote for Joe Biden. So there's that.
Doesn't give a shit if we have a $15 minimum wage or not. He'll never feel the pain of any of it, which is why he's comfortable enough to tell you to keep voting and doing the exact same thing. He's telling you to punch yourself in your fucking face. That's what they're telling you.
Okay, so that is the clip that Ryan Grimm shared. Now, I'm not here to say that Ryan Grimm edited this clip himself. I don't know. I don't know where the original clip came from on Twitter, but Ryan Grimm did share it. And the problem that people have with this is Ryan Grimm is a journalist and he didn't do his research before he retweeted this clip just to see if it had been edited in any way, shape, or form. And this is what I've told you guys before. People do this on Twitter. They take these clips, they leave out important parts that people really need to hear, and they make this narrative about the clip, and then people retweet it and more people retweet it, and not many people actually go to find the original video on YouTube, to go to the original source, or to find the context. And this is just not something that's happened with Jimmy Dore. I've seen this happen with multiple people on Twitter. This happens very often. So that's the problem that people have about this. Now, let me go ahead and show you. I think I need to go down. I want to show you.
I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton.
Again, that was weird. I want to show you the response that Jimmy had, because Jimmy did respond to this. So here's the response that Jimmy had. He said, @Ryan Grimm deceptively edited my video and does entire thread based on a lie that I didn't get a joke. Below is part he clipped where I say, David Sirota strong tweet. See, he's making it's a good joke. But then David is going to tell you to vote for the motherfucker. #Grimm job. So to be fair, I'm not even going to play this clip, the one on Twitter. I'm going to take you to the original video, which I actually watched, to show you what was taken out of that clip. So let's go to that. Let me pop out of here. And then I'll go back to the Caitlin Johnstone one. Okay, this right here is the original video. And the name of this video was called Biden to Hike Medicare Premiums and Funnel Profits to Private Insurers. That's the name of this video. So let's go ahead to that part. I think it starts right here. Yeah, it starts right here. Here we go. Again, for people just joining, this is the original video, not a clip on Twitter. So here we go.
Here's Joe Biden is privatizing Medicare. That's from March 24th of this year. The Biden administration is expanding Donald Trump's Medicare privatization scheme that is forcing hundreds of thousands of seniors into for-profit health care. Oh, David Sirota, strong tweet. David Sirota, strong tweet. He says, why did Susan Sarandon do this? You see, he's making that's a good joke. But then David Sirota is going to tell you to go vote for this motherfucker.
Right.
Okay. That's the part that's left out. So let's go back and hear that again. And then I'm going to play that clip that's on Twitter. So listen to this again.
Seniors into for-profit health care. Oh, David Sirota, strong tweet. David Sirota, strong tweet. He says, why did Susan Sarandon do this? You see, he's making that's a good joke. But then David Sirota is going to tell you to go vote for this motherfucker.
Right.
Do you hear what he said? You see, he's making this is a good joke. So he does acknowledge that's why it's important that you go to the original source, because I've seen this happen time and time again. Now, let's go back to that clip that Ryan Grimm shared. And again, I'm not saying that Ryan Grimm edited this. I don't know where the original Twitter video started, but he did share it. And this is why it's important that you go to the original source. Now, again, here we are.
What they're telling you.
Let's go back here. Oh, I have to restart it. Why did
Against Medicare for all, but for public option.
Because this is important. Now, you just saw
Barack Obama was. I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton, which same reason why I shouldn't have voted for Barack Obama. Because Barack Obama was going to do the exact same shit that John McCain and Mitt Romney were going to do, but he was going to put you to sleep so you wouldn't mind. And that's exactly what happened. Barack Obama kicked 5.1 million people out of their houses while he bailed out the banks. Barack Obama took us from 2 wars to 7. Barack Obama tortured Chelsea Manning. Barack Obama built those cages, deported more Hispanics and Mexicans and Latin Americans than all the presidents combined since 1890. This is the
Again, where's the lie? Where's the lie? And what was interesting to me is that out of everything that's said, that whole part that we just played in this clip, it was interesting to me that Ryan Grimm chose to focus on this part about David Sirota instead of all those things that were mentioned about Chelsea Manning, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton. That was interesting to me. That's how I knew it wasn't in good faith. So continue to listen because I want you to hear the difference between this clip on Twitter and the original video.
shit that Barack Obama did. Barack Obama promised us a public option. We didn't get it. By the way, Joe Biden also promised us a public option. He was against Medicare for all, but for public option. Where is it? You ain't never getting it. In fact, you're going to lose Medicare by voting for this guy. But guys like this are going to keep telling you to do that because he gets paid when you vote for him. That's why. His wife gets paid when Democrats stay in power. His wife is an elected Democrat. Of course. So if you keep listening to guys like this who get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep you inside the Democratic Party, you're going to keep being poorer and broker. Or if you listen to Shama Sawant, who actually has integrity, unlike this guy, she'll tell you the truth, unlike this guy. And the truth is, the road for progressives inside the Democratic Party leads to a graveyard and less Medicare, less Social Security, more war, and lower wages. That's what voting for this fucking guy does. And when this guy's telling you that because he makes money off it and doesn't give a shit how fucking broken you are, because he makes hundreds of thousands of dollars every fucking year off of Bernie Sanders' campaign, off of all kinds of bullshit that you have no idea about, and he'll never feel the pain of this Medicare cut. He'll never feel the pain of your Social Security cut. He doesn't give a shit if we have a $15 minimum wage or not. He'll never feel the pain of any of it, which is why he's comfortable enough to tell you to keep voting and doing the exact same thing. He's telling you to punch yourself in your fucking face. That's what they're telling you.
Now, notice this portion here, again, going back to this original tweet, this tweet from Ryan Grimm. What perhaps most incredible about this Jimmy Dore video is that he clearly misunderstood Sirota's joke. He thinks Sirota is attacking Sarandon. So again, let's go back to that original video. And you can see the part that they left out was Jimmy Dore actually acknowledging the joke. That's
it's forcing
important.
hundreds of thousands of seniors into for-profit health care. Oh, David Sirota, strong tweet. David Sirota, strong tweet. He says, why did Susan Sarandon do this? You see, he's making that's a good joke. But then David Sirota is going to tell you to go vote for this motherfucker.
Right. David.
Don't you think it's important to have included that part? This is why you cannot rely on these clips on Twitter without doing the without doing the research behind the scenes yourself. So Ryan Grimm was ratioed for this because other people were able to see, wait a minute. This is just a smear job. You're lying. You're a journalist. You didn't take the time to look and find the original video to see the full context. As a journalist, you couldn't do that. Why? Because maybe your original intent was just a smear. So that's a failure on Ryan Grimm's part. And he got ratio for it. And even Caitlin Johnstone called him out. This is extremely obnoxious smear by Grimm. The clip he's sharing cuts out multiple instances in which Dore makes it clear he gets the joke. And Grimm uses it as a cheap Jimmy's too dumb to understand comedy dunk for shit libs to retweet and cackle at. Oh, and let me chime in here. That's exactly what that's about. Like trying to make it seem like someone isn't smart enough or intelligent enough to understand a joke. That's what this is about. If you think that there isn't this level of academic elitism in this circle, you are wrong. There are people who are like Ryan Grimm. And by the way, I would have this conversation with Ryan Grimm. He probably wouldn't, but I would have this conversation with him. This level of academic elite people that you have in this space that think that they know everything. And how dare someone who didn't come from the same type of education that they came from, didn't come from the same type of class is a big issue that they came from. How dare they try to outsmart them? You know why that bothers them so much? Because it hurts their own intelligence. And it hurts their own intelligence because they spend so much time telling themselves that they're better because they went to a great school, or that they're better because they came from an upper class family. And David Sirota, don't know about Grimm, but I do know the academic circles, but I know Ryan Grimm didn't grow up poor, that's for sure. But David Sirota, for one, comes from that environment. He comes from elite academic circle, and he also comes from upper middle class. So those types of people, they don't like when someone who did not come from that same class, that may have came from a less than class. Jimmy Dore talks about growing up poor. They don't like when someone like that can outsmart them. So Caitlin Johnstone goes on to say, here's how Dore introduced the joke. Grimm claims he's too dumb to understand. And that was here where Jimmy played the part of the clip that they left out where he acknowledged the joke. And you can see here, even Michael mentioned, to help clear up the understanding in this thread, here's the context where Jimmy is acknowledging the joke. Caitlin Johnstone goes on to say, and here's another bit where they talk about the joke some more. So for the original, like you guys can see that video on his on Jimmy Dore's YouTube channel. It's a longer video, but you can see that video and hear the whole thing. And then she goes on to say, Grimm either knew about those other bits or knowingly framed the clip in a dishonest way, or some sleaze in Grimm's group chat shared the edited clip with comments that Grimm mindlessly regurgitated without bothering to fact check because he hates Dore. Either way, pretty gross. That's a problem. At least with me, when I do criticize people, I criticize them on the issues. And even then I make sure I have receipts. That's the difference. This really, I felt like, wasn't even Ryan Grimm's place to jump in and get involved in. It just looks like your whole job is just to smear people. He did the same thing with all the activists, those of us involved with the Medicare for All marches. Ryan Grimm was smearing us on Twitter. This guy who says he's a journalist, who says you really care about Medicare for All and you're smearing Medicare for All activists. That's why I told you a lot of these people from these elite academic circles, they don't really care as much as they say that they do. How dare a group of working class people get together and try to march for Medicare for All? This isn't through a campaign. How dare they do that? That's the problem with people in those circles. They have a one-track way of thinking, and anything outside of those lanes, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. Caitlin goes on to say, there is literally nothing in the edited video that even suggests that Dore doesn't get the joke. He's just in the middle of ranting about Sirota. It's only the narrative that Grimm inserted into his caption of the clip, which gives people that impression. And this is a problem. And this isn't the first time that someone like Ryan Grimm has done this. And it's not just been done with Jimmy Dore. I told you he smears activists. This is what he do. People like him, people like David Sirota, they're just here to stop progress. They say they want progress, but they want limited progress. They don't want full-fledged revolution. They're not revolutionaries. I don't even know if I would call those two reformists. I think they're just mid-libs. They want it a little bit done, but they don't really want to rock the boat. And anyone trying to do that, trying to rock that boat, they're going to smear you. This is what they do. So, the importance of that story is to let you know that this is why when you see those video clips on Twitter, for the love of God, please go back to the original video. People will edit things. They will make it deceiving. We've had people do this to us over at RBN. So I know from experience, this is what people will do. And it's a problem. Gregory said, it's why I say the Democrats are not a lesser evil, because every good social issue is undermined by their fakery in economic and foreign policies. Thank you so much for that, Gregory. That's a good point. And I just want to add one other thing that Caitlin mentioned about these chat groups. This is where a lot of these smear artists, this is where they start. You have like these DM groups. I know I've seen these groups myself. You have some of these DM groups, and what happens is every now and then they have a mole. And that mole will sit there and just take in all this information and then report it back to the people that they're smearing. It's really ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like grown ass men. Come on. All right. Let's go ahead and go into this updated story about this race that Nomiki's doing. I do have some updates about that I do want to go ahead and get into. Now, I talked about this the other day. I believe it was on Friday. For those who are not aware, Nomiki has decided to run for New York State Senate. The problem is the district that she's running in, which is her district, there was already a progressive that was running in that district. Her name is Kristen Gonzalez. She is endorsed by DSA. She's also endorsed by AOC. She announced months ago she's been in this race. And then Nomiki decided to throw her hat in the ring, causing all kind of friction and shit last week, shaking people up. And so now there is this conflict, right? Because now you have someone who is a contributor for the Majority Report running in this race. And at the same time, the Majority Report tells you to blah, 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 blah. I can't talk. Support the DSA progressive candidates that are running in these races. So it's an awkward moment. There's a conflict of interest because obviously she's a part of the show, but the show tells you to endorse the DSA candidates. So what are the hosts supposed to do? Are they supposed to back their co-host here, not co-host, their contributor here, their friend? Or are they supposed to go with their original strategy, which is back the DSA progressive candidates? So Nomiki really messed this up for a lot of people. Essentially, this is splitting the progressive vote, and that will happen unless she drops out of the race. In that event, neither one of them may win if she splits the vote, right? You also have Crowley's cousin is also in this race. She is not progressive. So this just stirred up a lot of trouble. Glenn Greenwald has gotten involved, and I want to go ahead and share this, and then I'm going to tell you the update. This made it all the way to Glenn Greenwald. So he said, who doesn't love a McCarthyite fascist who explicitly advocates having Congress investigate her political enemies because she's angry they criticized her online? Seems like a perfect fit for the Democratic Party and Majority Report. Good luck, Sam Cedar and his sidekick, Nomiki Konst. So let me show you what she said that caused this. Let me go in here. She must have someone blocked. So Nomiki tweeted this in response to Ro Khanna. And Ro Khanna is suspect. I've been telling you guys about this. So let's go to what he said first. He said the far left's refusal to condemn the immoral and illegal Putin invasion is appalling. It is a nihilistic relativism. See, guys, there was that word again, nihilistic. You see what I mean? I told you a lot of these talking heads, They all use the same words, the same word. They just keep repeating that word. That's how you know what team they're on. Goes on to say, I stand by my words in this exchange and reject Max Blumenthal and RT talking points where he's a contributor. I have a human rights progressive approach to FP. Now that was from Rokana back in March 9th, but Nomiki retweeted that recently because she didn't like the fact that Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, other people as well called out the fact that she jumped into this race when there was already a progressive candidate that was endorsed by DSA and AOC. And I'm sorry, but you should call that out because that's dividing the vote. The same person who has criticized us over at like RBN, anybody that knows Jimmy Dore, criticized us and told us that we are dividing the left. That same person physically is dividing the left when she entered this race. Come on, you can't make this up, right? So she goes on to retweet this from Rokana, who, by the way, Rokana has announced that he is supporting Nomiki, not the progressive who was in the race before her and backed by DSA. So that tells you where Rokana really sitting right now. She goes on to retweet this and says, at what point is Congress going to look into these paid propagandists here to disrupt the left and push fascist conspiracies? Some of the funding has shown up on tax returns being funneled through journalism awards by Assadis. These guys are toxic and spreading disinfo. I think we all know who she's talking about, who she's referring to. Obviously, Max Blumenthal, other people at the gray zone as well. That's coming from Nomiki. And like I said, you don't have to like Max Blumenthal. You don't have to like the gray zone. But when it gets to the point where you're smearing people, you see all this togetherness, they just smear merchants. That's it. You're smearing people, saying that Congress needs to look into them. Hello, snitch. Who are you? Would you have been that person that supported the fact when Congress was trying to tell Snoop and trying to tell other rappers like Eminem that they shouldn't be allowed to make their music? Is that you? So when Glenn Greenwald responds here, go back. That's what he's responding to. Who doesn't love a McCarthyite fascist who explicitly advocates having Congress investigate her political enemies because she's angry they criticized her online? That's snitch-like behavior. That's a rat. That is really suspect. God, no, you can't be invited to the party. If you invite Nomiki to a party, don't do anything there you don't want people to know about. That shit might come back to bite you. Just saying. So that's suspect. That's suspect. Nomiki retweeted Gwen and goes on to say, oh, great. The Nazis are coming. Do you guys see how this works? Let's see how many people like this. 303 likes. That's still too many. That's too many. Do you see why the Democratic Party is a cult? Anyone who criticizes their corrupt, crooked party, this is what they do to you. You're a Nazi, automatically a conspiracist. Automatically, Congress should look into you because you don't like their party. And this is one of the reasons why people like Roger Meadows continue to say, this is why we need to abandon political parties. This is why. It's a cult. People are so obsessed with getting into the party and being a part of this party and left versus right that they're not even good on the issues anymore. What are the issues? Do people even know? We should be looking at the political issues. Not, you don't like my party. This is a problem. So she goes on to call Glenn Greenwald a Nazi. Again, you don't have to like Glenn Greenwald. You don't have to like Max Blumenthal. You don't have to like any of these people. But when you get to the point where you're smearing them, where you're calling them Nazis, what the fuck is wrong with you? Do you have any evidence to back that up? Where are your receipts? This is not cool. This is not okay. And then she goes on to say down here, chip in, donate to her campaign. You see, guys, this is what it's all about. This is it. She just wants your money. How dare you criticize me? Donate to my campaign. After she jumped into a race that had a progressive candidate already running, who was Latina, by the way, and that says a lot because Nomiki's one of those people that comes forward and say, we need more people of color. We need more women. Actually, she would say it like that. We need more people of color. We need more women. And you jump into a race where you already have that represented because you have this vanity project. You want to make it all about you. This is vanity at its finest. This is privilege. NOMIKI KONST is privileged. And before you come to me and say, well, you don't know that. Oh, yes, I do. She wasn't going to no public schools. Let's be real. Let's be real. Now, like I said, this has become a conflict of interest because she's a contributor at the Majority Report. So what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to back their friend and the contributor of the show? Or are they supposed to do the right ethical thing, which is to back the DSA candidates, which is what they've been doing? Emma VIGELAND has responded. So Emma goes on to say, just going to be clear about this now. I support the entire DSA slate of candidates, not for personal reasons, but for ideological ones based in what I think is best for the movement. Now, I would argue here, I don't really think there is a movement left anymore. However, I will give kudos where it's due. Kudos to Emma for sticking to her guns and sticking to her principle, because that's the thing. You don't get to jump in and I'm going to be the flavor of the week. It's all about me. You don't get to do that, Nomiki, when there was already someone there. How dare you? So that's that. Now, other people have gone on to point out Alexander the Meh. That's an interesting name. Alexander the Meh says this is still up. And it's true. Let me see if they took it down yet. So here's the problem. And I told you this is where the conflict comes in. Majority Report has on their Twitter page. Now, this is the one for the show. Even though that's Sam's picture, this is the one for the show, not his personal Twitter. Left is best at NOMIKI KONST. So here is Majority Report basically giving some type of an endorsement or, hey, support Nomiki. Now, this came out June 1st, right? So this was before Emma made her announcement on Twitter like, yo, I'm supporting the DSA candidates. That's how it's going to be. But look at what's on the Majority Report Twitter page. So this is a problem. When the race comes, what are they going to tell you to do? What are they going to tell their audience? They're in New York, all of them. Yeah, you need to make sure that you back Kristen. That'll be awkward with Nomiki on the show. Hey, you need to go ahead and support Nomiki. That'd be pretty awkward for Kristen, who was already in the race, who you should be supporting if you tend to do this route. So, for those who did not see, this is when she gave the announcement.
Our Majority Report family, who is so dedicated to not just national issues, but issues in local communities across this country. And I want to announce here that I am running for State Senate of New York in the District 59. It's a brand new district that
and again, I pointed this out on Friday. If you notice Sam Cedars' expression, It seemed pretty clear to me that he didn't know about this. Do you see what I mean? So for those who don't know, there is redistricting. I can't talk tonight. There's redistricting happening in New York. So the districts were redrawn. That's not the point. If you are entering a race, it is your duty as someone choosing to be a candidate. You should know who you're running against when you sign up. She didn't do that. Listen to the rest of this.
Encompasses the community I live in. And you may have heard about the redistricting issues that happened recently. Well, we found out about this district a little over a week ago. And I was approached by many people in the community who I've organized with and gone through many challenges and fights against big interests like real estate and the MTA together and Amazon. And I am announcing today that I am running for New York State Senate in 59 so that we can keep the New York State Senate that we fought so hard to make progressive, because we are at risk of losing one of the only legislatures in this country that is Democratic led and possibly the only truly progressive legislature.
There it is.
So that we can keep it progressive, but there was already a progressive in the race.
Is very exciting.
So different now.
This is very exciting, and I mean, I want to talk about the district, but I think people have to understand just how, there's there are states.
Sam, you're taking too long. So that's that. So that's where the conflict lies. Now, there was one where she said, let me see if she put that. I can't remember if someone sent that to me or not. Shoot. There was another tweet where someone called her out for the fact that she jumped into this race and there was already a progressive running. And that person was also, a woman of color. As much as she talks about we need to have women of color, I can't find it, but someone put up a tweet or replied to her saying something like that. And she responded and said, Astoria is, my district, Astoria, is historically Greek. And that's true, but that did not go over well. That did not go over well. What are you saying, Nomiki? My district is historically Greek. Okay, and are you saying that you should win because you're Greek and the district is historically Greek? What the fuck are you trying to say? Progressive. God. I wish I could make these things up, you guys, but I really can't. I can't make it up. Let me go to some of these comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Mad Ocelot God 81. Split the vote greater than force the vote. Strategic genius. Where Pilgrim said too much snitching in the kitchen, LOL. Right? God, don't tell her nothing. Troy Z and Casey says Sabby Sabs, is Nomiki even making a case as to why people should choose Nomiki over the other candidates? Not so far from what I've seen. Again, like when she made that announcement, Emma and them did not know there was already a progressive in the race. So there's that. And thanks for the super chat, AJF. Being a Democrat is a blight if one's a leftist. Ooh. Okay, I'll take those comments on Rockfin. Progressive. I'm gonna stop. I guess I'll add this to the screen. Oh, you said no new comments? Oh, sorry. I misread that. Oh no, Nomiki has entered my brain. I've got those IQ points. Progressive. She's Black says, ugh, Gnome definitely sounds like a Valley girl. Sabby's voice imitation of her was spot on. I'm being silly tonight, you guys. I'm sorry. I am being silly. Yeah. So that's that, you guys. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Danny HAIPHONG. I hope you've learned a lot. Danny knows a lot about China. Definitely check out the Black Agenda Report, The Left Lens on YouTube, both of them. They also have articles as well. Follow that whole crew. Margaret Kimberly, Baraka Ajamu, Baraka follow that whole crew at Black Agenda Report, you guys. They do amazing work. So definitely check it out. All right, guys, that is all for me. I'm gonna do it one more time. I'm gonna do it one more time. Progressive. Have a good night. Keep up the fight. Progressive.